And I've just said that on film, which is really stupid.
Hello viewers and welcome to more of our Gamescom coverage. Now we're looking at World of Speed. My first time seeing World of Speed. We've been seeing the trailer for quite a few months, but we haven't seen much of the actual gameplay, what it's going to be about. And so here was an opportunity to see it in action. I get a hands-on, that'll be in part 2. But if Boris Johnson was to be a game designer, he'd be Peter Morris. Let's hear more from him.
Slightly Mad Studios, history-wise, we do racing games. It's kind of all we do. We've got a bunch of stuff, but racing games is where we're at. We've been doing this for about 10 years. Back in the old days, we started off with the GTR series, which is a very kind of sim-led series, PC only. It's still got a really active community even to this day, 10 years later. So that's some great stuff. In between then and now, we found fame. We're probably better known for our work on the Need for Speed Shift franchise, which kind of took a franchise that was in need of kind of rejuvenation and kickstarting, and we did that. We did Need for Speed Shift 1 and Need for Speed Shift 2, both really good Metacritic scores, #1 selling titles, great reviews, and the public loved them. So now, to celebrate 10 years in the business, we're working on 2 games at the moment. They're both showing here at Gamescom. We've got Project Cars, which is elsewhere in the show, which we're not really talking about here. That's very simulation-led. World of Speed, however, which is what we're talking about right now, is our take on action racing. So action racing is kind of, you know, the Metropolis Street Racers and the Project Gothams, that sort of thing. And our take on it is we looked at online racing. And I don't know what your experiences have been like, but if you're anything like me, racing online, it basically starts off with crashing out at the first corner, kind of realizing that you haven't got a chance in hell of winning the actual race, then being lapped by the machine that is the guy at the front, and he's just incredible at the game, and then you kind of give up all hope and you turn around and you start racing around the track in the wrong direction, and then you get booted from the server. And we thought, there must be a better way of doing online racing than this. So for the guys that are really good at online racing, it's fine at the moment. But for everybody else, for all the people out there like me, and I sincerely hope there are very few of them, we wanted to bring something new to the table for action racing. And we wanted to do team-based racing properly. Now, there's a bunch of games here at the show that claim they're doing team-based racing, but they're kind of not. They're still all about crossing the line first. We looked around and we saw that massively multiplayer online RPGs were doing team-based play properly. And by that I mean you kind of had a bunch of people that stuck together and they did team objectives together. They had their own characters with their own unique skill sets and their own unique roles, and they worked together as a team to take on quests, to take on raids, to take on dungeons. And each person in that team has their own kind of role. So you might have a guy whose character is a barbarian with a massive axe made of blood, and his job is to stand at the front of the thing and take on all comers and just kill everything and anything that comes into range. For people that don't have the same kind of aggression issues as the dude that plays the barbarian, they might choose to be a mage or a warlock or something like that, hanging around at the back, not directly in conflict with bad guys, but healing spells, things like that. And these are all very different roles, but they all contribute to the team's performance. The team itself is working to a single goal. And that's kind of what we're trying to do and what we're doing with World of Speed. We're taking this really team-based approach and applying it to the action racing genre. We're doing that by turbocharging a feature that we first introduced in the Shift series. So whenever we take on a game, we're trying to do 2 main things. Features are either best in class or they're innovations. So back in Shift, we innovated and we came up with the idea of driver score, where this was kind of our first tentative steps into making sure that people could progress through the structure of a game without necessarily coming first all the time. So we were rewarding skidding and hitting your top speed and doing jumps and chaining all these things together, gave you driver score, which let you progress through the system of the game without necessarily being awesome at racing. So with driver score 2.0, which is our imaginatively entitled reimagining of the system, we're taking that and we're iterating on it and we're making it truly best in class. We're making sure that all the people that are copying us with driver score are behind where we are with the next iteration of it. And key to that is the introduction of objectives. And this is kind of where it loops back round to the massively multiplayer online RPG stuff. So it's not all about racing and coming first. We have these things during each race called objectives. And they can be things like leading the race for a certain amount of time, being in second place for a certain amount of time, slipstreaming your opponents for a certain amount of time, mastering the track, spending a certain amount of time in the air, all that sort of stuff, crossing the line backwards, which is how I always play racing games. Slam on the handbrake and come over the line backwards. Happy days. So these objectives contribute heavily towards your team's final driver score. And what we're aiming for is a system where it doesn't matter if you come first, second or third or whatever, or eighth. Even if you're trailing the race, and even if you're kind of pottering around doing kind of at the back and you can't win, you're still actively contributing to the way that your team is performing in that race. So even if you're in eighth, you can still slipstream the guy in seventh, and you can be working towards that objective. So some objectives you'll know about before you start the race. So there could be a race that's available for the next week, say, and it's got a certain set of objectives. Now you and your car club, which is kind of our equivalent of a clan, you look at that set of objectives and you think, you begin, before the race has even started, you begin to think who would be best suited to fulfill which role within that race. So this is kind of the parallel of the barbarian and the mage in the MMORPG stuff. Because you might have an objective which is to master corners, and you think, right, we need a nice low grippy car, something that really sticks. So you might have a guy that's got a tooled up Lotus Elise, which is fast and sticky, and it sideswipes through the bends beautifully. But then you might have another objective that's to do with sliding around corners, and a guy in your car club might have a tooled up Mustang Boss, something like that, right? And he's supercharged the engine, and he's fitted low friction tyres, so he's best suited for sliding around corners. So even before the race has begun, you're kind of thinking about what roles you're going to take as a team throughout the race. Now, layering on top of that, the way the objectives handle kind of changes throughout the course of the race itself. So although you might go in with a plan, you're also reacting to the way that your team is handling itself throughout the race, and the way that your opponents are handling themselves as well. So if there's an objective where at least one person on your team needs to cross the line having taken no damage, you might have one guy on the opposing team that's hanging way back and trying to staying out of the fracas, and he's the one that they're trying to get across the line safely. Knowing that, your guys change their roles ever so slightly, or somebody takes on the role of trying to stop him getting your objective. It's this kind of dynamic interplay and dance inside the game itself that really makes this something special. I mean, nobody else out there is doing anything like this, and it makes for a really interesting racing experience. Most people have about 20 years worth of muscle memory when it comes to racing games. I was crossing the line first. But once you kind of break that and you start playing racing games in a slightly different way with this team objective thing, it's actually really interesting. The kind of realization that even though some of your opponents have already crossed the line, the race isn't over. You can still be earning your team objectives whilst you're kind of racing the last chunk of the race, and it makes for an interesting play experience.
Great presentation there from Peter Morris telling us about the game. We're going to learn a bit more in part 2. We're going to see the demo that they had set up for us, and I'll be giving you my initial feelings on the game as well. So certainly an arcade take of that, there's no doubt, but let's keep our options open. It could be great fun. More in part 2.